started.
Welcome everybody to our Thursday, October 8th Spill the Tea event. Just for the purposes of the recording, my name is Jeffrey Newhauser. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Education at Earlham College. I am joined by Carrie Bubb. And I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit more, Carrie. Again, for those who are watching the video at a later time, for those of you who don't know, we do offer career coaching services through the CGCE. So if anything through this video sparks some questions or you have some avenues that you would like to explore, feel free to reach out to one of us and we would love to meet with you. Well, Carrie, I think we're ready to get started with the actual official questions. But I would love it if you would introduce yourself instead of me going through, the kind of the list of things that you have done. I would love if you would just, give a summary of what you are proud of that you have done, all of the things that you've done in your career, and then what you are doing now. If you could just kind of give us an overview.
Sure. I graduated from Earlham in 1992, and I actually was a politics major. I had enough history classes for a major in that too, but I didn't want to take the comps. I just wanted to do one thesis, or the thesis or whatever it was we had to do for history. So I just did the politics one. I also went to Germany, Austria while I was at Earlham. So those were the things that I really enjoyed about Earlham and my educational background there. After Earlham, I went to grad school. I went to law school in Switzerland. I had a Rotary International Foundation ambassadorial fellowship that covered that for me. And after law school, I came back to the United States, and I was only going to be here for a few months. And then I thought I was going to the Peace Corps. I was all set. I was going to West Africa. And during that couple months that I was here, I met my ex. And so I kind of changed my plans and decided not to go to the Peace Corps and raised a family. And so I went into business for a while, and it was about 2002, and something really terrible happened to a good friend of mine, and it made me stop and think. And like, she was my age, life is short, what are we doing? And as I reflected on that, I realized I had kind of lost my original intention a little bit. I wasn't doing what I was doing was fine. I liked it, but what I was doing wasn't something that I had passion for. I mean, I had wanted to go to the Peace Corps for a reason. I had wanted to do something to be more involved with the world other than just having a job. And as I reflected on it, I realized that I had kind of lost a little bit of myself, and I took a year because I wanted to make a good decision. So I took a year and really had a year of introspection and reflection. I was still working, but I was really thinking about, I can't go to the Peace Corps. I've got little kids. What am I going to do? What thinking of all the things that are important to me and all of the values I have and all of the skills that I believe I have, what can I do that would be meaningful and really put me back in touch with who I am and who I wanted to be. And after a year of thinking about it and really taking time and looking into things and thinking about how I felt about things, I decided that was teaching for me. That would still allow me to be in the city I was in and take care of my children and not, when I went to law school, my primary area of focus was international minority protection law. And that can be you do a lot of traveling and it's not super safe. And so I couldn't do that with kids anymore. So I decided to go into teaching, and I went and I just went through a program to get my teaching license. And I did that locally. And when I got my license, they just licensed me in everything I had a degree in. And so I'm now licensed in French, German, English, history, and government. And I'm licensed for 5 through 12, which is a choice that you can make probably in some states. I don't know how it works in all of the states. You can be just high school 9 through 12. You can be just middle school. You can be K through 5, I think, but I'm 5 through 12. I did a middle school certification and a high school certification. Um, a student taught in a high school and in a middle school, which is how I learned I don't like middle school students. I mean, I like them fine as people, but I don't want to teach them. And so I've only taught in high schools. And now I've been teaching for about 15 years.
Have you been able to teach in all of those subjects during your 15 years?
Okay, so if you have people interested in being a teacher, my situation is a little bit unusual. I have taught 17 different courses, no, 19 different courses in my 15-ish years as a teacher. And I have never taught a government course. But I did teach a geography course, which I'm not even licensed for. And it's kind of interesting how that happened, and kind of comes back to the whole Earlham thing. The geography teacher had to quit for health reasons 3 weeks into the second semester, and they didn't have anybody else licensed in geography. So the principal came to me and was like, Carrie, I need a favor. I got to have you teach this geography class. And I was like, you know, I'm not licensed to like, that's not one of my licenses. She was like, I know, but can you do it? And I was like, well, of course I can do it. I mean, in my Earlham experience and all of my kind of my broad-based Earlham education and my Earlham related travels, I think really prepared me for that in a way that, you know, might have made me as effective or more effective as somebody who had the license but hadn't had the experience. Because especially with AP Human Geography, I mean, it's so cross-curricular, and my Earlham education really paid off in that case.
Yeah. So this wasn't on my list of questions, but based on something you said in your intro, where you said you took the year off to, you know, search for the career path that you felt you were still having the impact. Can't remember the exact language that you used, but have you been able to find that through education over the last 15 years?
For sure, for sure. This is in terms of like who I wanted to be and what was important to me, and teaching is really fulfilling in terms of knowing that you're making a contribution to the world, and knowing that, and to the world in general, because you send these people out, and then every life they touch, like you touch their lives, but you send them out, and then every life they touch, you've also been able to, you know, contribute to that. And so it's kind of like the ripple effect. It's really, really, it's really meaningful, and it's really fulfilling. And also, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you've got kids in front of you, and you see the light bulbs. I mean, these are kind of the stereotypical things people say, that you see the light bulbs go off and it feels good. Or, you know, you have kids who are having problems and you're able to help them find solutions. Or just, I'm really excited right now because like I am on a just crusade about writing with my English 9 students. And I collected their writing today, and it's like night and day from when we started, just even at the beginning of the semester. And so I was like, I mean, that makes you happy. Like, all right. But it isn't just about those things that you think of, like improvement in their skills, or, you know, helping the student today with this problem or whatever. I mean, really, those students go out and they've learned, like, my goal is to help them learn to think about the world and learn what their place in the world is, and to help them become empowered, to feel empowered, to take action, to live their truth, to make a difference. I mean, I put it in quotes because it's kind of cliche, but actually it's important. So, I mean, I don't want to denigrate it in any way. But yeah, it's being a teacher is so fulfilling.
Wonderful. So one of the questions that I had was that I'm wondering is, how has the field of education changed since you started in 2001, 2002?
Well, we could do a whole interview just on the COVID environment.
Yeah.
So like that's major changes. But overall, I suspect that question varies depending on district, depending on subject, depending on state. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of variance there depending on where you are and who you are and what you teach. One thing that has changed a lot is the technology and like blended learning and bringing in more resources and multimedia resources. And I taught French for a long time. When I started teaching French, I was printing computer pictures to try to create authentic situation. You know, not authentic, but what can you do? You got to give them something to talk about. Now we can do anything. And we watch commercials from France. We Musique Mercredi. We start Wednesdays with a popular music video that just like one of the new releases from France and do an activity with that. And the realia is field trips. You can go check out the Eiffel Tower if you want to. And technology has made a huge difference in creating more interactive classroom environment, like a classroom environment where even if you're trapped in the classroom, you can still interact with the world. So that's a huge way that it's changed. There are other ways too. The pressure on students is a lot different now than it used to be. The distractions for students also is a lot greater than it used to be. We don't really use textbooks anymore.
How do you think COVID will change education long term permanently?
I am unsure about that. I mean, I can see ways it could potentially change, but I'm not going to make a prediction. I think one thing that'll change is that districts are going to open a virtual school. Districts are going to start having virtual schools. So there'll be, we were just talking about, Caitlin, like the 15 or 16 schools in my city. There'll be 15 or 16 schools plus a virtual school. Actually, probably plus 3 or 4 virtual schools. We already have one, like Homestead High School in Fort Wayne already started a wholly virtual school, and kids are enrolling in it from any state. I have a friend who lives in Richmond, Indiana, actually, and who is a teacher in Nevada. So, I mean, that's a huge change. You used to have to work in your district or move. That's no longer necessarily the case. So that'll be one change. I also don't think that we'll ever lose, and even teachers who were older and maybe set in their ways have been forced to go multimedia, and I can't imagine that we'll ever lose that component. Blended learning is probably here to stay. I don't know. I suppose that in terms of cost savings, districts could cut back on books, maybe, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. Like, when I got to choose the book, I chose a textbook and an e-textbook, so the kids had a choice, or maybe had a textbook in the classroom and had an e-textbook at home or whatever it was. But there's really a lot of data, a lot of studies have been done that say 100% like virtual texts, it's not the best for learning right now. Maybe we find a better way to use them and interact with them, and that'll change. But at this point, even PhDs who are reading online and then testing afterwards don't do as well as if they read on paper. I don't know how that'll change, but I think those are some of the ways it could change.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So switching topics just a little bit, still in talking about your students, but what are some of your favorite parts about teaching, especially when you're talking with students who are interested in getting into education? What would you tell them are really the most rewarding parts? I know you've mentioned a couple.
Teaching is fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fun. You have to like it. Like you have to know that that's what you want to do, and you have to like kids, and you have to find the environment that's right for you and probably the age group that's right for you. I did not have fun at middle school, but teaching high school, I love it. It's fun and it's never ever boring. And sometimes people are like, oh, you teach the same thing all day. I don't, but like I've heard people say that. Oh, you teach the same thing all day. Doesn't it get boring? No, because every single time a new set of kids walk in my room, they bring themselves with them, and you never get the same thing twice. It's super interesting, and it's a lot of fun.
It's
I
good
hate
to,
the paperwork.
well, that's the next question is what's the flip side? What are the parts that you don't necessarily enjoy?
The parts that I don't enjoy are the paperwork, the meeting requirements paperwork. The state wants you to do this. It isn't necessarily, it isn't really required. Your kids don't need you to do it. It doesn't help your kids in any way, but here you are spending 3 hours on paperwork. And that, I spent the whole day yesterday on paperwork. Like we had a day off and I felt like 8 hours on paperwork, so I'm still a little salty about it. The paperwork is the downside.
Because there's not actually time off.
Right. Right. They're really, really, yeah. It's a good thing it's fun and it's a good thing it's interesting because you spend a lot of time doing it.
Yeah. For students who are thinking about getting into education, um, what kind of advice would you give, whether it's an Earlham student or just anybody, what kind of advice would you give just to somebody who's thinking about going into the field of education?
I would say talk to some teachers, and I would say, and one thing I really like about new education programs is that they get you in schools starting early in your educational path so that it used to be you didn't see a classroom or students until the last semester of your before you graduate from college with your teaching degree. And so people were going through their whole education, getting their teaching degree, finding out their last semester that they didn't like it, that they didn't like kids, or that didn't, it wasn't something they wanted to do. But now um, students are in the classroom from, really early on. And I think that's critical because pretty fast if you like working with little kids, if you're going to like working with big kids. Um, and maybe shadow a teacher if you can find a school where you could do that. Some schools would require you to pass background check before they'll let you in the room. But most, if you're a college student, your school will usually help you handle that. Um, or if you know somebody who can sign you in as a guest, but I would say the most important thing is to get into a school and see what it is, volunteer at a school, visit shadow somebody, talk to some teachers and see if it is what you think it is
Yeah.
for young students.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the advice I give because we didn't talk about this, but I started out as an education major but Taylor put us in the classroom within the first semester. And it was within 2 semesters that I realized I didn't want to go into public school teaching. So, and it was because we were in the classroom and I kept getting put in middle school classrooms. I was like, I don't know about this age group.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like if I had only had a middle school experience, I would not be a teacher.
Yeah.
I would not be a teacher. That wasn't fun, and it's way too much work to do if it isn't fun, if it isn't interesting to you. But some people, middle school is the right age group. I know people who love middle school and think that, well, I couldn't work in high school. I know people who love elementary school, and I mean, I'm kind of a jerk, but they're sticky.
And my mom is one of the people, she loves teaching middle school. She works at Leo and
Mm-hmm.
she one of her favorite age groups are the middle schoolers. And I don't fully understand, but it really does. I mean, it's her personality. She loves middle schoolers. She is a middle schooler.
So if the student observes like middle school and they don't like it, doesn't mean they don't like teaching.
Yep.
Maybe try little kids, maybe try older kids. Like if you think you're interested in teaching, I would say don't just like try one thing and then say it's not for you. Maybe shadow at a couple of different places, check out with little kids, check out with big kids, volunteer for an after school program, something like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Um, you pre-answered some of my questions, so I'm running out. Alice, did you have any questions before I try to find some more that I had?
Not necessarily any questions, but just like comment like with the things you've been saying. My teacher always like says about what you mentioned. Also for the students of like what you like about teaching, of like helping them out and just like raising the ideas of like seeing those like light bulbs like switch.
Mhm.
She will always mention that, and she will always say like it's like so different coming like one group of students, even though she's teaching like the same like material. Like her morning class will like completely be different from like that my like or afternoon
Right.
class, and she will always just be so intrigued by it.
Oh, I remembered one of my questions I was going to ask you. It was more of a follow-up, but what is, of all the things you're licensed in and all of the subjects that you can teach, what is your favorite one to teach?
Uh, it kind of depends on what I'm teaching right now. And I like them all for different reasons. And I even really like teaching geography. And I'm not even licensed in it. That was a fun thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, I wouldn't teach middle school, and I've never taught government, so I don't know about that. But when I was teaching history, it was a blast. When I was teaching English, I liked it. Um, you know what I really do love? When I was at Bishop Luers, which is a private and it's private Catholic school, but they operate independently. Um, so there's a lot of freedom. I started an honors French series, and we had regular French, like French 1, 2, 3, 4. I started honors French series, and it was honors French 1, honors French 2, honors French 3, French 5. So they skipped a year. And I had a lot of students also that did IU honors program for the summer and got credit that way. So they would graduate to French 5. And those honors French programs were so fun. And actually, you know, I had a text a little bit ago from a student that used to be in my honors French 2 class at Luers who's like texting me now. I'm not even at Luers anymore. Like um, I really did enjoy it. I don't know if it was just those groups or I don't know necessarily if it was the subject. Maybe it was. That was really fun. I had a lot of fun with that.
Do you keep in touch with a lot of your students post-graduation?
Hmm. Yeah, I do. I get texts all the time. Actually, an Earlham student who graduated last year, Josie Burton,
Oh yeah, from
she
Fort.
was my student, and I
Yeah,
hear from her all the time.
yeah, because she had Drew as well. We've talked about this.
Yeah, right. Um, and Camille King is she a junior this year? She's a junior this year? Nope. Yep.
Yeah, I can't.
I lost a year with COVID. Um, yeah. I, and one of my former students last year lived in Wilbur House, and I had lived in Wilbur House, so he was like texting me pictures of. I was like, "Do they still have that big shower?" And yeah. I keep in touch with a lot of my students. Um, I had a student who graduated a few years ago. He doesn't go to Earlham, but texted me and said, "Can we get coffee?" So we had coffee a couple weekends ago. Yeah, I do keep in touch with my students.
Yeah,
A lot
that's
of them like friend me on social media. Some of them like really keep in touch.
yeah.
Every once in a while, this is really the best, you guys. Every once in a while, you'll get a message that says, "Hey, remember me? I'm 28 now. I graduated so long ago, and I just want to let you know that I remember this thing you told us, and I think about it almost every day." Like that stuff is cool, and that's what I was talking about like with the ripples. And that person, they made something that I hope them learn part of their daily lives, and that has to be affecting the people they're around.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I chose to go into education as well. Just the ripple effect of it.
Right.
Um, going back to, we talked a little bit about going into teaching. So what would make a teacher candidate, so if someone's interviewing a teacher candidate, what would make them stand out? What experiences that they've had would make them stand out from other teacher candidates?
This is also, I think, where Earlham students this is also, I think, where Earlham students have an advantage. The things they want, the things they're looking for, tend to be things that are just kind of inherent to the Earlham identity, to this identity of Earlham students. Not to stereotype and not to like, you know, um, but in terms of like Earlham students are engaged, they're interested, they care about things, they have some sort of passion, and they bring that passion into other things that they do. They have a broad-based education. They want to participate in different opportunities and have experiences in different areas. And that is really like when I do interviews, people are like, you did what? You know what? I mean, when I got hired here, one of the assistant principals who he wasn't even in on the interview, came up to me at a different time and he was like, I just looked at your license. That's crazy. You teach German? I was like, and then he was like, how did that happen? Then I wore my Earlham shirt to school and he was like, Earlham, you went to Earlham? And I think for Earlham students, they have an inherent advantage just because of who they are and because of the opportunities that Earlham provides for them. They're kind of set up for good interviews. Did that answer your question? I went off on a tangent.
Well, you especially because you mentioned your own ability to travel internationally a couple times while at Earlham, correct?
Yes, and afterward, like after I'd had that experience, then I didn't stay home after that. Mm-hmm. Once you have that experience and you have that confidence to do it, then you can graduate and you just do it.
Yeah. Well, it's still, I think, I can't remember the last numbers, but it's less than 5% of undergraduate students each year are studying abroad. So just to have that experience, which I think it's 70% of Earlham students have by the time they graduate, like that already puts them, like you mentioned, puts them ahead of the pack just because they've had that experience. So
I don't want to get too off track from the teaching thing, but actually as a teacher, I get contacted sometimes by people in industry where, we'll get people who contact us, get letters from them, actually even lunch invitations now and again, saying, what can we do to get you to send us more French students? I'm like, dude, it isn't me, I'm trying. But there in close by here in Warsaw, Indiana, there is a lot of, it's a medical industry, and I don't know the right word. I know it, but I don't remember it. They produce things like, not a good plug for Earlham. I don't even have any vocabulary. They produce prosthetic limbs, a lot of prosthetics and things like that. And they contacted a bunch of Fort Wayne and Warsaw foreign language teachers, invited us to lunch, gave us the whole pitch about like sending them students. So in the medical industry and the prosthetics industry, they are looking for students with international experience and who have multiple languages. And so you think it's only about teaching or what, but really, I think that foreign study thing, it's going to help you get a teaching job. It's going to help you get an anything job.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Alice, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask? I want to make sure that I'm giving you adequate chances to ask questions if you want to ask any.
No, I think right now I'm fine.
What I just lost. I had another question I wanted to ask you. Well, really, I'd love to hear some other stuff about, what other pieces. So we've talked about the international study quite a bit. What other pieces of your Earlham experience have you really carried throughout your career, whether it's in law or business or education?
I think one of the things that's most important to education, and it's one of the things that we miss badly on in the profession right now, is the need. We tend to want to compartmentalize material. This is English class, this is math class, this is history class. Like everything isn't integrated and interactive. Like you can put things into a box and then it just stops there. And one of the things that I think Earlham does exceptionally well, it certainly was my experience at Earlham, was that I got a broad-based education with experience and exposure to a lot of areas. And it was always about how knowledge integrates with the world and how the material from one course or the knowledge and exposure I'm getting in one course integrates with things I'm learning in other courses, and how all of that integrates with my experience in the world and shapes the way I interact. One subject shapes the way I interact with another subject. One experience shapes the way I interact with the next experience. And that's something I think that we really miss and that our students need earlier. Like, I don't think you should just, the kids who go to Earlham, the students who go to Earlham are lucky that they get that, but I wish we did it in high school. And that is something that I feel has made me very successful. And even at the school I'm at now, where the students, I teach integrated ninth grade, they struggle with reading. I can count the students I have that read at grade level on one hand. I have students who read 4 or 5 grades below grade level. Like, that's my average. I have every once in a while students who do not read at all. So I'm talking about students with a lot of struggles at home, struggles financially, struggles legally, I'm teaching at the lowest income school in my city, which is, my district is a low income district in general, and it's the roughest school. And I'm teaching integrated English 9, and they don't understand the material. They don't understand the story because they have no history background. They have no context for it. And so I try to integrate like some historical information, multimedia, and if they're fascinated by it. And they're like, why don't we learn this? Why don't we do this? We are doing it. What you talking about? But they like the stories better when you can integrate all that other material with them. If I just read that story, they would not want to read it. But if I can integrate what I know about history or something about economics or something about law, and when I start bringing all this different stuff into it, they care about it more, they understand it better, and they retain it better. And I think that is what Earlham sets people up to do. That's certainly what I got from Earlham.
Yeah, the power of the liberal arts education. I
Right.
think you really hit the nail on the head for the sales pitch for the liberal arts.
I'm a fan.
Yeah, same. So I have 2 more questions that I would like to ask. Actually, neither of them are on the list I sent you.
That's fine.
One of them that's been triggered from something you mentioned. You have quite a bit of experience working at more low income and rougher schools, as you've kind of mentioned. I'll try to figure out this question as I ask it, but how do you stay really emotionally and physically kind of rested and prepared to deal with your day-to-day requirements of being a teacher and being in that kind of a environment, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, first let's clarify that we're setting COVID aside from this.
Yep.
Because right now it's not ideal. That's a really good question, and there are some rough days. But I also think that in having an ability to be like reflective or introspective, and also having a strong sense of self, like, do I know why I'm doing this? What am I doing? You know, that matters. If you, that does help. There are rough days though. There are days where like especially, well, you know what? It's when I have not done the best job with lesson planning, probably. When I missed on a lesson plan, they, it's pejorative, they like absorb your energy and don't give you any back.
Mhm.
And when you're on the lesson plan and you're hitting it right, you get energy back from the students. So it's like it's kind of self-sustaining. I mean, it's you put it out, you get it back. It's it's a cycle. Um, I guess cycle's not really the right word either, but it's not as much of a problem if you miss on the lesson plan. If you have misjudged the kids, if you have misjudged your material, if you have misjudged there, then you're losing energy and not getting any back. And those days are really difficult and exhausting. And this is what I would say to also to students who are just going into education. First year, you're going to have a lot of those, but you get better at it in the second year and the third year. And, you know, by your fifth year, you have very few of them. So they should stick with it and find a mentor who can help them.
I think the mentorship, I think that's really important, especially for new teachers.
A mentor or a collaborator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's something I probably since my first year when I was doing education was find a teacher mentor once you get into teaching. I mean, they tell me that now. I'm working on a doctorate in education now, and they still tell me that. You know, always find your mentor teachers.
And always be one when you can.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
That gives you energy too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, oh, I was going to say something I'm doing now, something that I specifically came to this school to do is I'm part of a district STEAM pilot program, and it is a more integrated approach. And really, I mean, in terms of being hired or being desirable, and my background, my educational background, and my Earlham experiences made me the teacher that they wanted to hire. When I applied for this job, I had the job offer before I got out of my car on the way home, and I only live 10 minutes away.
That's fantastic.
But I mean, they had been doing interviews all day. I left the building, and in 10 minutes, I had a phone call. So that I know that my Earlham resume, my Earlham experience, you know, I know that that set me up for this because they are looking for people who are integrated and can think about the real world and think about the integration of all their material. And that's what I do here.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Um, so I have one more question. I don't know, Caitlin or Alice, do you guys have any other questions that you want to ask before I?
Yeah, I was wondering like how you were saying about that you have to like do these mandatory things or like requirements from the government. How do you get around, I guess, from like integrating your philosophy and your passion and your interest into the teaching, while still like covering all of those like requirements that you need to do?
Alice, that was such an astute question. I'm impressed. That was a very astute question. Um, there are days when it's difficult, and there are days when you're frustrated because you're like, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't even what I think is important. This doesn't align with my philosophy. And then it's just a choice of how much energy am I going to give to that? At what level can I complete it without it taking too much of my time or too much of my energy. Sometimes I get pretty mad about it. Like, you would not have wanted to see me yesterday. I was not in a good mood yesterday. But sometimes I think getting mad about it makes it worse than it is. And so if you can look at it and be like, okay, what do I really have to do to complete this requirement? When can I do it, and how does it fit in? And then you just do it and put it away and like get back to the kids, because that's what you're there for. That's a really good question, and it is probably one of the challenges, that I face. I think at some point you get so used to it being there that until there's some new requirement, it's just like you roll your eyes and you're like, that's a hassle, and you check the boxes and move on. And you don't really spend too much time thinking about it until there's something new, and then you get mad again. But there is never going to be a job where you're not, there's really, I can't imagine a job where you're not going to face some of that, because people that you work with will have different philosophical foundations than you have. People have different maybe goals, or understand goals differently than you do. People have different interpretations of whatever the job is. What is teaching? Well, maybe it's different to me because of my background than it is to somebody else. And there will always be somebody above you who wants to check and make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. And that's really what the paperwork's about. In teaching, it is, for the most part. The state wants to check and make sure, and we spend quite a bit of time proving we're teaching. But I just don't focus on it. And as long as it's not anything new, you kind of get used to it. It's not what you went into it for. But I've worked different places. I was in business, and there's always something like that.
Yeah, that was a great question, Alice. Thanks for asking.
Really fantastic question.
All my questions to shame.
Another question I was thinking about when you were saying that, like, you have all these different like type of students of different levels, either academically or just like financially and like status wise. How much do you like I guess put in or like how do you at the end of the semester evaluate this like students based on like their current position?
You mean academically speaking, or can you just the last part of that question? Will you ask that again or clarify that a little bit? I'm not sure if I understood.
Yeah, so like for example, you mentioned how like the reading levels are like different for like each individual. How do you measure like either their growth and like put a grade onto that, or just like the progress reports and all of that? Like how do you go in about evaluating them?
That's a really good question, and there is some tension at the high school level between meeting the standard that is set. These are the standards, these are the grade level standards that you have to meet, or I mean at any level. This is what I-STEP assesses, and we have to pass I-STEP. The students have to pass I-STEP. Or if this student is telling me I would like to go to college, and they're in the 9th grade, reading at a 6th grade level, if that is their goal, how do I help them reach their goal? And so grades in high school really, and especially at my old school, this was more true. I really do think that they should be standards linked and mastery based, because if they aren't, if you're just turning something in and it's nowhere near the standard, and I'm just giving you an A every time you turn something in, then you think you're doing great, and that your parent, not that you're not doing great, but you think that you have achieved this standard and mastered this skill at a very high level, and your parents think that, oh, my kid is great at school, she's a great writer, she always has A's in English. And I do run into this. Kids come here from middle school after they're passing out A's, which sometimes happens, and then they read at a 5th grade level and they're in the 9th grade, and that's not what we're supposed to be assessing. And so there really is some tension there between how are we meeting the standard, And how do we respect that student's efforts and growth? And so, and especially at a school like this where almost nobody can meet the standard when they come here, or almost nobody does meet the standard when they come here, and maybe has like 6 years to achieve. I mean, 6 years to do catch up for in the semester or the 2 semesters that I have them. Well, technically they're not meeting the ninth grade standard, but if we can go from 5th grade to 8th grade or 5th grade to 7th grade, that's a remarkable achievement for that student. And so I do a lot of growth grading. I especially at this school. Well, that was true at the last school too. I really have kind of focused a lot of my grading time, my feedback time on process oriented learning. So don't we're trying to get away from kids turning in a paper and thinking, I'm done with that. Kids turn this in and they get some feedback, and what can you do to revise that, to make it better? And then taking the feedback that you have, in 2 days, we're going to do a similar assignment. It's not identical, or maybe next week we'll do a similar assignment. It's not identical, but can you show me something different than you showed me last time? Can you get closer to this standard, or can you at least, let's use capital letters and punctuation. I don't want to see anything without capital letters and punctuation. That's what we're going to do today. Only, like, you must have that. Well, that isn't really meeting the ninth grade standard for writing, but that's a huge improvement over what I got last week. And right now, my students are really focused on giving me a because. I think this because, I make a prediction about a story. I think this will happen because, and then they have to use evidence from the story. Like, that's our big focus right now. So if you can meet that requirement and keep using your capital letters and punctuation, then, then we're on the right track and we're moving forward, and they get more feedback. And when we feel that we've mastered that, then I would say, these are the things you did well, and every feedback, and then one thing that you can focus on for next time. And so once they master consistently that you can focus on for next time, then I add a new focus. So they still have to meet the old ones, and we try to meet the new ones. Sometimes it's a little frustrating for them and for me, probably, especially in the COVID environment, because attendance is so inconsistent. And attendance makes a big difference when you're trying to focus on growth and process. A metacognition is another really important aspect to that. So metacognition is am I aware of what I know? Can I talk about what I know? Does that make sense? Can I think about what happened and my role in it? I mean, I'm simplifying it, but so in their writing, maybe if we have a really rough one, they'll get their feedback, and then their bell work for the next day will be a metacognition exercise. What is it that you think caused you the most problems on your writing yesterday? And what is one thing that you think you could focus on to get a better outcome next time? And so having them name that for themselves is also, it gives them a sense, it empowers them. It makes them feel like they have some control about it, makes them less frustrated. It also helps them remember and really think about, oh, I knew how to do that and I just didn't do it. Or, oh, I never thought about that before. And so those are the things we try to focus on instead of focusing on, I don't read at a ninth grade level. Does that answer your question? Kind of. That was probably
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
pedagogical than was maybe necessary, but I'm sorry.
I love going into the pedagogical stuff. So I love talking about the metacognition and all that fun stuff. So just with the last, well, we only have a couple minutes left. So this last question, you can kind of pick which direction you want to go. So either could you, or both, could you talk about what are the next steps for Carrie, if that's staying in education, or if you have other big plans? And is there any other last advice or anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to share? So two very big questions, but
Yeah.
left.
Okay, that's really interesting. And things would happen, and the students. I'm a big fan of like if I mess up, like some teachers are like, you can't do anything wrong. If I mess up, I'm tell the kid I messed up. And sometimes a kid who knows me pretty well and knows like what my policy is on that will be like, Miss Bob, no. And the kids will be like, shut up. I, no, she's don't let me do something wrong. Tell me I have two different shoes on, which happened. Um, in fact, if they didn't tell me till like fourth period, the next day I yelled at first, second, and third period. I was like, why didn't you tell me I had two different shoes on? They're like, we didn't think it mattered. Um, I always, if I don't like something, sometimes I'll tell them, like the kids I'll be like, I can't do that because I'm doing a bunch of paperwork. We have a new requirement. I'm not gonna have time to come to your game tonight or whatever. And the kids sometimes will be like, are you gonna quit? I'm like, I don't know. I always tell my Mary Poppins, I'll stay until the wind changes. I love what I do. And because of that experience I went through that I referenced earlier with my friend and like her, life is short and life is way too short to do something that doesn't fulfill you, that doesn't make you happy, that isn't interesting. As long as I love what I do, I'm doing this. And as long as I find it interesting and as long as I look forward to coming to work, then I'm doing this. And when that is not true, then I will do something else. And I really can't tell you when that'll be or what it'll be, but when this isn't fulfilling and when it's not fun, then I will do something else. And I don't know what it'll be. I guess it'll be what's interesting at the time.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. This has been a lot of fun getting to know you and asking you these questions. Thank you, Alice, for joining us. Thank you for your great questions, putting my questions to shame. But yeah, so we can just wrap this up. So at least for the purpose of the recording, thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us in the CGCE if you want to schedule coaching appointments or you have any other career discerning experiences that you would like to talk through or ask us about. So thank you everybody for watching and thank you all for joining us.
And students are certainly welcome. Students who are interested in education or have questions are certainly welcome to reach out to me as well.
Yeah.
I'm at Fort Wayne Community Schools at Wayne High School. You can probably Google it, or Earlham probably has my contact information.
Do you mind if students reach out, do you mind if we share your email address?
Oh, sure. That's fine.
Wonderful. Caitlin, I think you can stop the recording now if you want.